Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I'm Bill Correll. I'm really fortunate to be here with my best buddy, who I lovingly call my twin, Jeremias. If you ever get to see a picture of the two of us standing together, I'm 6'4", I think, dripping wet. You're like 5'1", it seems, maybe 5'2" on a good day. I've got a big old long beard, and she's good looking, and I'm really not. So in addition to Jan Jeremias, my buddyette, I've got another good friend, Jason Wendroff-Rawnicki, who we have gotten to be good friends with. Jan's known him for a long time, but I've gotten to be good friends with Jason over the last year. And welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much for having me, Bill. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited. I have no idea what we're going to talk about today, and I love that. So
yeah. So here's what's coming to my mind right now. We've spent 12 months, and a lot of that time was dealing with expressing in words feelings that we've had for a while. I think some folks have written before. I certainly hadn't written, 2,000 word chapter. I've written some other things, a lot of technical stuff, but I would say there's a lot of darkness, just in terms of a heaviness, if you will, listening to people's stories with, how they shared what they went through. And now tomorrow is the release date of the book that we've been working on with Grief Hab and Samantha Ruth, and I kind of feel like we're coming into the light, that after all of that, we are birthing a work that is common for all of us. We've got all of our energy shared. And to me, it really does seem like, coming up for air after being underwater for a while, I don't know.
yeah,
How is it for you folks?
for me, it's a little different. I mean, one of the reasons why I decided to take my whole business and shift it into the grief space
Yep.
was because there wasn't enough light in that space. There was a lot of darkness. There's a lot of um, connectivity, but a connectivity around the pain of grief, not about the lessons to be learned from grief.
Right.
And so I really wanted to be a spokesperson for bringing in the light, even in the early stages of grief, because you're right, Bill, it can get heavy. And if we latch on to the wrong people, we can stay in that negative, dark space for a really long time, some years, if not decades. And it doesn't have to be, but I know a lot of grieving people who don't want to leave that place because they found their community, but they're commiserating over the pain rather than the lessons that they can learn from it.
Yeah. And maybe a little less than sharing, if you will, more like trauma sharing in many instances. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see how that would become habit forming for some people,
Oh,
especially
yes.
people, who never really connected with other folks, and now they find
Hmm.
out we've got this profound shared experience. Neither one of us knew each other an hour ago, but guess what? I guess we all go through this, right?
Yeah, everybody's going to go through it at some point. Everyone's going to lose somebody that they love and that they're close to. Sometimes it seems like it's in order, like a child that has lost a parent. Sometimes it's, in my case, it seemed very out of order that I lost my sister, And that just blew like the time frame around other people, parents that have lost children.
Yeah.
Some of those, and then so some of them seem like we have this expectation of the order that things that the way it should go, and then
Right.
when it doesn't quite go that way, we think we're the only ones that this happens to. But in fact, that order is just a construct, like a societal and personal construct. There's really no order.
Yes, we do find that out once we get to a certain age.
For
So
sure.
Dan, do you have another metaphor that works better for you? Maybe I was thinking about a phoenix rising from the ashes.
I
Go ahead.
think for me, I had a different experience, like now knowing it's coming out. As I shared a little bit, with friends, the link was like, oh my gosh, like people are going to read this. Um, because I really was vulnerable in my chapter and authentic and shared things that I have never shared in my entire life on a public forum
Yeah.
like this. And once it's out there, you can't take it back. So it was that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like what did I freaking do? Kind of feeling. And knowing that it's, I know how healing it was for me to write it. And I know that somebody else is going to benefit from reading it. But I think as it got closer, part of me, not a whole part, but just there was a little tinge of like, oh my gosh, this is real.
Yeah.
And people are going to actually read this. And almost also, am I prepared for comments and questions that people might like now come back? Because I guess part of my story came from a place of like, I never shared it because I didn't want to be labeled with it. Like, I
Yes.
didn't want that to become my identity. And so I think that's part of it also, is that I kind of always shied away from sharing the story fully because I didn't really want to be known as the person who went through that.
Mm.
And now I'm looking at it as much more of like, how can I help someone else? And it's a lot less about me and much more about how I can serve someone else who might be going through a similar journey. And to Jason's note, I think what happens is I think what you're describing, Jason, when you said like the whole time frame, I think we also have this whole societal kind of construct around the fact that older people are supposed to die and young
Mhm.
people are not supposed to die. And
Yeah.
so that's another thing that happens, I think, in your like in, I would assume in your case, but also when I have friends who've like lost children, it's around the same idea of like, I'm
Yeah.
supposed to go first.
Mhm.
Um, and so, they're young and they're not supposed to die first kind of attitude.
Yeah, that's 100%. There's definitely an age component to it because I remember like after like the for her funeral, like there was like lines around the block, like it was overwhelming, so overwhelming that the amount of people that came out to show their support, almost like too much, and not that it's not that, I mean, I understand everybody wants to show their support, but for me and my family, like just the person after person after person, like it's like, and they all want to say their condolences, but like, I mean, for the family, like, we're overwhelmed as it is. Never mind having 500 people wanting to hug and express their words to you. So yeah.
Well, the conversation that we have here weekly, it's generated out of a desire to give people access to empowerment,
Mm,
either where to go and seek an energy upgrade or where to go and give something away. Uh, but it's this whole thing when you become disempowered. A lot of times, it's a little bit like sitting in your car. You're turning the key, but the ignition's not coming on, or you push on the gas and nothing happens, and you can't
yep.
put it in gear, but you just don't think you'll ever get out of it. So what I looked at with regard to all of these great stories, and people, we've got every kind of loss you can think of,
Mm.
and I think the neat part of it is there'll be something, I believe, that will connect with almost all human beings at some level, and hopefully it'll bring them a little bit of peace and a little bit of empowerment, or a way back to empowerment.
Yeah, 100%. Because what we believe is really what we invite into our lives. And if we believe that we're never going to get out of this like negative spiral, we won't. But if we believe that there's a possibility or even just hope of change, then we can create that change. And I think that's what you guys are doing here is you're giving people that, even if it's just a seed of hope, that something could be different. I mean, they could still be in that negative space, but you're like sort of future pacing their belief system within knowing that there's even a possibility of change, that if someone else got out of this situation, if someone else grew from this, if someone else really just thrived after their loss, then maybe they can too. Because why not me? Why not you? Why not anybody here like that's listening to this podcast?
Mm.
And that was the word that came to my mind, Jason, and then you just said it, and that was hope.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's what um, people really need. And I heard a really interesting story about Hiroshima, and they were talking about that after the devastation, there was a rumor that went around that nothing would ever grow on that land again. Like
Yep.
no trees, no grass, no flowers would ever grow. And so
Mm.
that lack of hope or resilience kind of caused people to even like go down an even darker path, because there was like they really had that belief. It was like nature had kind of like rebelled against itself, and it had like broken all the laws of nature. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden when things started to grow again, it was that glimmer of hope that actually, or that nature had not been altered in some way, that
Yeah.
gave people the opportunity to kind of then start to move forward. But it
Yep.
was all, it was like that whole path of going down that negative path and not
Mhm.
even thinking that you can get out of it. Like, I'm
And
always going to be in this place.
And when you're saying that, I'm thinking a few months ago, I took a trip to the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and there's a tree there that's actually getting quite big now. And there's like it's all fenced, and there's signs and stuff around it. But the significance of that tree is that in the rubble of 9/11, in the rubble of the Twin Towers, they did find just a little, like one little stalk of green from this, and there was one tree that a branch survived the whole devastation. And so what they did was that they pulled out, like the firefighters and the servicemen, they pulled out this little tree and then they nursed it back to life. And now what they do is they take a cutting of that tree and they send it all over the world as a symbol that no matter what your struggle, no matter what your challenge, no matter how big the devastation is, there's growth is still possible. And so when you were saying that, like that, the image of that tree just kind of resonates in my mind, because all it takes is one branch just to know that that there's still that hope and still that possibility.
The word possibility is very strong, simply because a possibility can be anything that you choose to make it want. And
Mm.
sometimes you have to be in that conversation for possibility in order for it to occur. Otherwise, it's just one little green thing. Who really cares? Get rid of it. But now you've got, who knows, hundreds, maybe thousands of pieces of this tree that have been shipped all over the world. And I think that's an interesting thing for us to point to here, that I don't know, we're just under 200 episodes, 180 something. Um, and we have come at empowerment so many different ways. Today we're focusing on grief and loss. We have done that from time to time, but the show's more about what happens when you're off your game and you
Mm.
don't want,
Yeah.
what's your road back look like? And Jason, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a couple questions about, that feeling of being overwhelmed with the loss of your sister, just the family. And then you
Yeah.
have to go through the ritual,
Yeah.
the ritual of people showing up, pouring their hearts out to you in some cases, just giving you a quiet hug, and others smiling and saying, this is going to pass, but it sucks right now, or something, that's just real. But I think that the thing that I'm interested in is, when did you notice and start to feel like there was some green coming back into your life? Like there was a sprig of possibility there that really could make a difference.
Well, after my sister passed, that I had this real this epiphany sort of thing, because I realized that if I was continuing to live the lifestyle, because I was very overweight, I was very unhealthy, I ate a
Yeah.
lot of processed foods. I kind of used to joke around, but not quite joke around, that like pizza and beer were the staples of my diet probably back then. Didn't really care about that kind of stuff. And I realized very quickly that if I had continued down that road, then I would be headed for an early grave too. And
Yeah.
so I realized that I needed to quickly shift a lot of my lifestyle around, because I wanted to give myself the best chance of living a healthy lifestyle and thinking of my own, not just my own lifespan, but my own health span.
Right.
And for me, I think it happened a little bit more quickly than for some of my other colleagues, because I'm just like, I have to make changes now. Like, if I don't, then I'm gonna let Laura, my sister's car accident, not just kill her, but kill me too. And I had this really, I maybe within the first, I want to say 6 months. I don't remember, because the first year, like, I don't remember everything that happened that first year. It's kind of like in little blocks and little vignettes, because I couldn't put the timeline together. I just know that certain things happen. And so with this epiphany, it was just like, I will not let her car accident kill me as well. So I need to do whatever I need to do to figure out how to live with my grief and not just fight against it, for
Yeah.
the rest of my life.
Yeah. And when did it really occur to you what to do other than to start taking care of your body?
So it was a gradual process. It didn't happen all at once. And I think that's where a lot of people get into a little bit of trouble, is they try to tackle too much,
Yeah.
and they get too overwhelmed. And so I just focused on one little thing at a time. So even in my own physical health, it was just like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to clean my house and throw out all the garbage and have all kinds of apples and stuff. No, the first step was that, I had a kind of a wonky experience with red meat. So I slowly like cut some of the red meat out, which then led to chicken and then fish eventually. And I mostly became vegetarian. And it just so happens that now I'm starting to put more animal protein back into my diet, because research is showing that we need more
Yep.
protein. And as a vegetarian, it's really hard to get the protein without getting the calories with it. So it was and then from even my diet, it went from changing over like my laundry detergents and my soaps and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a gradual process, but taking one step at a time, finding one behavior or one small change that you can make. I think is the only way to do it sustainably, because especially when you're going through loss, everything seems to get overwhelming. And when you start to get overwhelmed, you don't take action on anything.
Yeah. I love that. And the whole nature of my consulting platform is 5%.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep,
You know,
yep,
I go into a business and I bring, all the folks together and we look for opportunities.
yep.
And in each area, we don't have to transform the whole business and teach people how to do things completely different. Let's pick the
Right,
things that we want to transform the most first, and let's work on a plan for getting them to 5% better than they are now.
right.
And
But
the
but it's
interesting part of that, yeah, I was just going to say it. The interesting part of that is you get momentum. Okay.
mhm,
Once you have a win, then you have another win. You have a setback or two, but you still have this, this possibility, and you're speaking with each other. What didn't we do? What can we learn from that? And
right.
so it's kind of the same thing with our own human behaviors, and
Yes.
how we regard what our future is going to look like.
Well, and the same thing is, it's not just 5%, right? It's 5% with consistency. It's
Yes,
5%
on
because
top
we
of.
Yeah, on top of it. So that's what builds that momentum, right? And we can do the same thing with our loss and grief, right? Like, what's the one thing that I need to do differently today? Or what's the, one tiny 5% shift or 2% shift that I can make right now from where I am?
Yeah. Jan, what have you learned?
Um, I think that the biggest thing for me was to let go of judging myself so harshly. I tend to hold myself to a really high standard of, let's say, perfectionism. And I think for me, it was allowing myself to not be okay sometimes, to actually realize that you know, if I had a bad day, it wasn't like, it was kind of like, to Jason's point, it was kind of like if I had a bad day, and let's say, and I'll equate it because so many people don't, let's say, are dieting, that if I had a bad day that didn't need to set the pattern for the next month, I was like,
Yeah.
able to say it there and let it go. And so if I had a bad day, it was just like, okay, that was yesterday. And, you know, whatever it was an anniversary of something. It was whatever it was. Maybe it was no reason at all. I just woke up and I had a memory or a flash, and then it was a bad day. But allowing myself, not living there, but allowing myself to have them, and then sit there and say, okay, well, I need to practice a little self compassion and understand why I'm so sad today, or maybe not understand it and just feel it, not run away from it, and then just say, okay, like, what's next? Like, that would be my word. Like, okay, what's next? Like, what can you do next? What's next? And I think that that was huge for me, because I think that when we're compassionate for ourselves, we're compassionate for other people. I think if we hold ourselves to that highest standard, we tend to hold others in the same place. And we tend to be a little bit judgmental as to, like, how they're going through, quote unquote, their process. It's like they're like, if there's a right and a wrong way, they're not doing it right.
Yeah.
Well, and
Really.
I giggled, Jan, because I had a day like that yesterday. I had a day like that yesterday, right? And people also think that, oh, once you're like a certain many years out, that, oh, no, like things happen, life happens still. And like I had a day yesterday, and I'm like, I really need to go and crush and do this and take action. And I'm like, you know what? I, I'm not feeling that today. I'm feeling a little melancholy. I'm feeling a little, I need to just take some time. I've been that way. I've been really active all of last week, promoting the book and doing the interviews, and I'm like, you know what? I just need some downtime, like, and and giving myself permission to do that and be a little sad and be a little, melancholy without judging it. And I know tomorrow, and I'm like, all right. And then tomorrow's going to be a brand new day. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to wake up, and then I'll go after it. But today, no, that's not happening. So I gave
Right.
myself like the whole day just to do whatever or nothing. Like I didn't do much of anything yesterday. So
Yeah. The shoulds are very powerful.
yeah,
And part of what you guys were talking about before, how our culture works, is we take feedback, not even what happened, but what we think happened, our story about what happened, really,
mhm,
and we use it to either A, invalidate, or B, validate something, right? And all of that is like, I don't deserve to have this win, or you know what, I knew if I tried it this way it wasn't going to work, and I don't know why I always do this, that whole train of thought. But if you look for failure as validation that you're doing something, that's a whole different game. You
yeah,
know, if you get out of bed in the morning and you go like, today I'm gonna, yeah, no, 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 and then after you've done all that and expended all that energy predicting, you can say, oh, of course I will if I do, but otherwise, if I don't, that's going to be okay too, right?
yeah,
So, so where it comes down to, and what I heard you saying too, Jan, was the 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 biggest hurdles to leap over are our responses in our head to things that we're thinking, and making them mean something in that moment.
oh yeah, right, for sure. Yeah, meanings are huge. Like even just what does grief even mean, right? Like what does loss mean? Just like really start in the last couple of years, I've been really digging into like a lot of these presuppositions that I have in my head by looking at the meanings that I'm giving things or the meanings that other people give them that I've adopted as my own, which
Right.
is another thing altogether. I'm just like, oh no, I don't want to go down that road. Like I don't mind believing what I believe in, but to take on somebody else's belief around that is that's like no, no.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that comes to mind is like being someone who tends to plan. Like I had to give up like if I knew an anniversary was coming up, was being flexible around how I was going to feel and asking myself like, how do I feel today and what do I need? Like
Right.
those kind of questions versus thinking I was going to get up and, it's the anniversary of my father's passing and I'm going to go to the cemetery and I'm going to like, in Judaism, you put a rock on on the tombstone like that and having this whole plan and then even forcing myself to like, because that's who I am, like saying, okay, well, that was my plan and then getting attached to the plan. And then sort of at one point or another, throwing up my hands and saying, there is no plan. Like, I'm going to
Mhm.
get up and say, okay, well, how do I feel today on this day? And maybe I feel nothing like doing what I thought I was going to do that day, around something like that. And kind of giving up that idea of I needed a plan and asking myself those questions like, how do I feel today? And maybe I feel like, celebrating that day because I had, whatever it is, but not being so I want to say, so rigid about the whole thing that it was supposed to look a particular way, or because I think then it comes into what you talked about just now, Jason, is that whole idea of how people label things like what will people
Mhm.
think? And, if I, and that kind of thing. And I didn't want, like, for me, I didn't want it to be around that at all. I wanted it to be around how I felt and not what other people were going to, how other people were going to view it.
And one thing you said, I think, which is really important, is to be able to identify like when those yearly things are coming up. Like, the holidays are, we just celebrated Thanksgiving and, like understanding that these could be challenging times because it's everyone saying, oh, be with family and be with friends and love and joy. And some people aren't actually feeling those things. They're missing I'm missing my sister, or they're missing their parents or their child, or these kinds of things. And not everybody can force themselves to be happy or even present themselves as such. So it's definitely, I also think of that expression, man plans and God laughs, right? Like we kind of have to take on that on ourselves. We need to create, I think it's important to create a plan, but then kind of laughing at yourself and letting go of the plan when it doesn't serve you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Plus the other part of having a lifetime of experience with those loved ones, you're never quite sure what group of loved ones you're walking into, you know? Are they going to be receptive, or is it going to fall to me, to pull other people out of the dink, or what are we doing here,
Yeah.
and all of that is just taking you away from just being present in the moment and enjoying it for whatever it becomes. Like, no,
Right.
there's no plan. What do we want to do?
Yeah. Right. What would make me feel something right now? Like what, and always coming back to that present moment, because that's where we really live in the here and now, and that's where all of our choices and decisions are made, which directs us what our future is going to look like too.
Right now is the only time we can do anything.
Correct.
There
Well,
is
and
no
that,
other time but now. I mean, we have this construct of the future, but that's so we can make plans to do things now.
yep. Yeah.
And
Well, and kind of going back to even your question about like sort of, some of the other things other than the physical stuff that I do, right? It's when you come into the present moment and you can acknowledge how you feel in the present moment, then you
yeah,
know how to like make those adjustments. So, if I'm feeling sad, I can, all right, I'm feeling sad right now. Do I want to continue to feel sad? And then creating choices like I can choose how I feel, and I can make different choices and then change it if I want to, or stay with the emotion that I'm feeling.
There's been a couple of folks in the last, I don't know, month or two, that once they start understanding with, all the grief conversation and the writing of the book, and being on podcasts and all the other things that have been going on, um, I'm getting unsolicited reactions to things. And I got a phone call out of the blue. It's a man who went to high school. I never got to really spend any time with him while we were that age, but since then, because I knew people that he knew, he kind of looked me up on Facebook, and he's more or less just kind of come into my life, whether he was invited or not. And I got a messenger call from him, and he said, "You know what? I listened to that podcast of you and that other guy, and I got to tell you, you're both full of crap. You don't know beans about grief. I can tell you everything there is to know about grief. I know about grief, you know." And I'm thinking to myself, what a joyous noise,
Yeah. Yep.
it moved him. And
Hmm.
for God's sake, we don't want to move people in a predictable way. We just want to move them, give
Yeah.
them opportunity to get unstuck from where they are. They may
Yeah.
get stuck in a new place, but hey, enjoy the moment of expressing yourself, right?
Right, and for him, if he was stuck in a place of like desperation and like that anger could literally drive him right, like to a new that's a new emotion maybe for him. So that's a more empowering emotion than being depressed or being so because there's energy behind that, and once we
Yeah.
can fuel that energy, now we have some power to work with, and so
Yeah.
I think I always love, even when I work with people and they resist, there's so much to be learned within the resistance because it's movement in some direction.
Well, see, here's the luxury that the three of us have, and many of the folks who have also been, here chatting with us over the last going on 4 years now. Um, we are extraordinarily blessed.
Mm.
It Our station in life, how we've gotten educated, that we caught fire somewhere along the way and wanted to learn more than we knew at the time, all that. And for some of us, a lifelong decision to be, ongoing growth and development. It's a huge thing. But what's really cool is where you see somebody who's stopped learning,
Yeah.
and they get into this resigned state of mind, like this is how it is, there's nothing better than this, until they open their mouth around the wrong people. And those people go, "Why do you feel that way? You know, have
Yeah.
you looked at so and so over there? Go talk to them about what's working in their life," or whatever it is. But the whole notion of focusing on grief for a while, I think, is good tonic for a while. You know
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
saying? And if you start to get stuck in that conversation, like there's no way out, and all we're doing is sharing over and over and over about the big ones that really hurt us. um, I've always found, if you can presence something, it disappears.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for those folks who are saying things that keep them stuck in the conversation, it occurs to me that they haven't really presenced what it really was for them.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Because
and
we get to a point, Jason, where we don't have to talk about things again. It's done.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and when Jan was saying like in her early stage, she didn't want to be known as that person, like the grief person or the divorce person or whatever, however you identify that part. I was very clear. I was not going to be known as the guy with the dead sister. I didn't want any part of that whatsoever. The problem is that the more I fought that, and the more I try to take that, like invalidated a part of my identity, not the whole identity, but a small part kept on being invalidated every time I said that to myself. Like, I don't want to be known as this guy. I don't want to know what. And then eventually it had to come out. It's going to come out in some way, right? It's going to come out. Energy, emotions are energy in motion, and they need a place. So it's either going to come out in a constructive way, which it
Yeah.
is now, but in the beginning it was very destructive, and it caused me a lot of struggle and a lot of pain. So, and I'm still having the conversations, but now the conversations are to help others rather than, necessarily for me personally.
To your point, Jason, it makes me smile because I used to I remember not wanting to be known as that person. Well, a part of my story is about the divorce and then a number of other things, but I didn't want, but all of the people who came and spoke to me, like all these people all of a sudden would come to me unsolicited, like Bill said, with relationship problems. I had it was like all of a sudden, like people would want to talk to me about their marriage or whatever, or the fact that they had just gotten divorced. And I'm sitting there going, like, this is the last thing I want to talk about. Like, I do not want to talk about this. But it seemed like that was not the universe's plan because
Yeah.
everybody seemed just like I felt like I had a target on my chest that
Yeah.
said, talk to her, she's divorced, kind of thing, And I was just like, and every now and then, when I still have somebody who comes in and talks to me, I mean, I understand why they're talking to me because I really do have a very, I understand totally. Well, in a lot of ways, I can't. Every situation is different, but I understand a lot of what they're going through, so I can definitely relate to them in that way. But it was always funny to me in the beginning because I was always like, again, really, I want to forget this,
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I think the universe has other plans for us. As I said, like I didn't expect, even up as a little as like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna teach yoga. I'm gonna, that kind of, and work with the essential oils and not even touch the grief thing. But then I was at a conference, and all of a sudden I started a Zoom meeting, and then that Zoom meeting started to grow, and and then it just like little steps. So there's no big thing. It's all the little steps, all those little 5% improvements that happen. Because I can't point to one where I'm like, oh, this is the exact, I'm like, the decisions, yes, but like the actions, it's lots of little actions over time.
Yeah, I'm thinking about human nature in all of this because we're close to 8 billion on the planet right now, and there's nobody who's not touched by it somehow, some way.
Right.
Some profoundly. I mean, I can't even think about the folks that are in the Middle East or in Ukraine or some, all of that sort of thing, and the folks that have family members that are going through all of that. So the point is that in our lives we make decisions, and it's always a dichotomy. It's never an array. We could do this, or this, because that's too complicated. Too many
Yeah, yeah.
moving parts, the what ifs and the yeah buts and the how abouts. But so we get locked into or locked out of a habitual response to something. That's why
Mm,
certain people, never make much more than their parents did in their lifetime, and other
right.
people make hundreds of times what their parents did. It's being locked in or locked out of possibilities. So when you're thinking in terms of how to express yourself and how to share, there's this charity begins at home sort of thing where
Hmm.
you got to work on yourself first. I got to work on me, you know.
Yeah.
I got to be in some semblance of working order for the functions in my life to actually happen in a routine, predictable fashion, or be able to declare there is no plan, and roll with it in a powerful way. And the same thing happens when setbacks occur. Grief is really about an accumulation for some people where you hit a point where it breaks the camel's back, the last straw. You know, I've heard from other people that, well, I lost this person, I lost that person. I really didn't lose my mind over grief. And then I have to say back to them, but the last 4 times that we talked to each other, it's all you talked about.
Mm, yeah.
What a great life you had with so and so. And I
Yeah.
said,
And
what if you're just not acknowledging, or there's something inside of you that makes that wrong for you to talk about it, and you're like stealing the moment, you know what I mean, like doing something that is not good for you, but by saying it over and over again, it's not resolved. So if
yeah.
it's not resolved, what's there for you to do? What would be the next thing you would want to do?
Yeah, and I think too, especially in the early stages of loss, we spend more time focusing on the way the person died rather than the way they lived. And so I try,
Right.
like in my groups, we have many conversations about memories and telling about their sibling, because that's the population sort of that is in this peer support group that I run. But like telling the stories of their sibling, because we have to remember how they lived, not just the way they died, and their life has meaning. And then we can also transform their death into a meaning as well. Like, so all the work that I do is in honor of my sister, and when I'm doing things like this, I feel like closer to her because I get a chance to talk about her and mention her name, and tell some stories about her and how she's affected me. And I think it's that, and her death has even affected other people's lives that never had the opportunity to know her because of the lessons that I've learned from her passing.
Well, especially with the foundation work that your family does. I mean, you can't even put a count on how many times that candle has lit other candles around the
Right. Yeah.
world now.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
see,
No,
that's the
exactly.
important part of what we're doing.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's like the guy who plants a tree knowing that he'll never be able to sit under it and experience the shade.
Yeah. Yes. No, it's beautiful. Right. That's a beautiful analogy of, kind of how we need to have that effect on people's lives and light other people's candles rather than snuff them out.
Yeah, and it kind of for me anyway, I can say it kind of takes away the need to be able to see a cause and effect relationship between what I do, you know?
Oh,
So if I were looking for that validation, like it's working or it isn't working, a phone call from somebody telling me that you and that Jason guy don't know your ass from a hole in the ground, about grief and death. I can tell you all about that. That might have been a little upsetting to somebody else, but it was me. It was like, yeah, baby, I haven't heard you, get up on your hind legs like that about anything, and that's cool. Now
yeah.
what to do with that energy?
Yeah.
Where do
Oh,
we, that's a fire hose, man. Let's see if we can point it in a good direction for you.
right, because we'd rather build something up than burn something down with it, right?
Amen.
Right, and so that and that's what like really spurs me are those little emails. Like when I started writing email updates, I would get little emails back saying, I resonate with that. I felt so alone, and just someone languaging what I'm going through, or just knowing that someone else in this world is going through the same thing I'm going through. I
Yeah.
mean, that's enough to keep me going, even if it was just one person. But I get regular emails back from people when I hit on a topic that is, and I just talk about myself, just like you were saying, Bill, right? We can only focus on ourselves.
Yep.
So I just focus on what I'm going through and share that with others, and it becomes universal.
That was an important pause. They all are. If you think about it for a moment, um, how we met each other, Jan, you and I, within certainly the last 2.5 years. And now you, Jason, as long as you've known Jan, and
Hmm.
now the three of us to be sitting here having this conversation and other things that we're doing with each other, it's kind of cool.
Oh, it's amazing. Yep.
Whatever conversation brought us together. And it's also powerful that we've got a lot of, I mean, like we're a drop in the bucket, with all of the really great people that I've met so far,
Hmm.
and how good they are at expressing what you do after you've acknowledged that it's grief that's really upsetting your life.
Yeah.
We got a lot of trained folks out there that are, I'm saying, there's no way that it cannot make a difference.
Well, and I kind of believe that we all have a very specific challenge that we need to overcome. I think we've come to get a little woo woo. We've come into this world with like a contract that this is the thing that I need to figure out. And then whether it's, for us, it's grief or loss. For other people, it's addiction. So like everybody has their own core lesson that they need to learn. And then it's like, how do we take those challenges and learn those lessons from them as quickly as we can, so then we can then help other people to do the same thing. We need to be the change that we want to see. Because I couldn't keep complaining that there was no support for bereaved siblings, but yet I wasn't doing anything about that. So like when I realized, I was like, oh, I can't keep complaining that there's no peer support
Yep.
unless I get involved and be the peer support that I wish I had 26 years ago.
Well, that's one of the cool things that I see in both you and Jan, your commitment to other people's health, if even outside of any other conversation that we're going to have, both from the essential oils perspective, yoga. Both of you are very accomplished. You're quite good at leading groups, and then all of your scientific experience as well. Both of you are well trained people in sciences, right? You're in the psychology end, Jason,
Yes,
and you're
yes.
more applied science, as I understand it, Jan. And what's really cool about that is I'm a guy who went to high school, took a few college courses, and then started a business, you know? And we all got to where we are right now through a series of decisions. Some were made for us, and others we made ourselves. But I also see that we're in a position right now to have some excess in some area, like your experience, Jan. You're sought after because people value your opinion, because when you open your mouth, you're worth listening to. And that's not a small thing for a lot of people. There are people will run on for a long time, but when you have something to say and you're talking about it at such a fundamental level, a level of human being, and how do you feel and how do you start to understand and process what your feelings mean for you, and what do you really need right now, those aren't the things that we talked about when I was a kid.
I was just talking about that with someone recently, Bill, about the fact that we're not taught how to do that, and we're not taught to do that. We're taught to basically follow, what our parents tell us to do, and we're definitely not. That's definitely not where education is focused in the U.S. in that way. And so, if we had that kind of intonation, it's kind of almost, and I'm going to be dramatic, it's almost beaten out of us, not physically, but it's kind of squashed from the time we probably can. So unless we train ourselves to kind of ask those questions, and that is a learned skill to get up in the morning and say, okay, well, I open my eyes and I'm like, okay, well, how do I feel today? Do I need anything specific today? Like, I mean, almost every day there are certain things I do. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, part of it is because I have Tonka, so I have a dog, so I have to get outside. So every day I get outside. So some things aren't negotiable for me, but other things I get to make a choice, like Jason said. And so I think that some of that is real training ourselves. That one is that we have the right to ask those questions, because I think that gets so ingrained out of us. It's almost like if I ask myself those questions, I'm being selfish in some way. I'm being too self-absorbed, that kind of thing, kind of attitude. And then also, I think the reason to me this conversation is so important because, I have friends that have never really lost anybody important to them in their life, kind of thing yet. I mean, it's going to happen to us all, but that has not. But I think we go through life with lots of other types of losses. Like I'm now working with someone around the corner from me, literally around the corner, who recently lost her job and how devastated she is. And I think we experience loss. I mean, that goes to a lot of what we speak to, loss of identity, loss of role, loss of, all these different things, which are so common to everybody's experience. So I think it applies to everyone in some form.
And I always question about when you start to ask it, is it grief or is it just being a human being, right? Like we're, like we love to put labels on it, but we're like human beings, and we have all of these experiences. We don't have to label everything. And so, like, is it part of the like, we all go through challenges, we all go through like, so I'm like, all right, that's why it's important to in my opinion, to put that grief in the context of the rest of your life, so that this way it's not like, oh, so many people go, oh, I'm a griever, I'm bereaved, and that becomes their entire identity, rather than, wait, no, I'm still a husband, I'm still, an uncle, I'm still a yoga teacher, I'm still Jason. And grief is included in that for sure. But
Yes.
but when we realize it's a real tapestry of identities that we just need to weave together. It doesn't have to be like, one part doesn't have to be everything. You have to look at all of the colors of your rainbow, I guess.
Well, the other neat thing about that is I always like to talk about being an integrated human being, is where you're not a drop in the ocean and all these different things at different times. You're the same person. You're an
Yeah.
ocean and a drop, as Ken likes to say.
Hmm.
And it's and it's holographic, that there, if you're just plain true to being yourself and managing your response to the world in a responsible way that you've put some thought into ahead of time, and you're
Yep.
not just gut level reacting and making messes and creating consequences and that sort of thing, it can give you the opportunity to, as you're saying, be all those so-called different things, but you're the same player. You're not
Yeah.
changing hats, you're not changing facial makeup or putting a mask on. You're just who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, oh, go ahead, Jen. Sorry.
No, no, no. Go ahead, Jason, and then I'll
I
go.
was just it just made me think, like, there's a lot of characteristics I had as a young kid that I totally forgot about, and more recently I'm like, I liked that part of myself. Why aren't I doing those things anymore? And so you can, like, just pick and choose, like, oh, I'm going to bring that back. Oh, I don't like this part is not serving me anymore, so I'm going to just put that in the background, and then just pull the parts that I really want, to embody more often.
Yeah.
I did an interesting I gave a workshop with my friend Mary Jane not too, I don't know, it's probably close to a year ago now. And we did something really interesting is we had everybody bring baby pictures
Mm.
and to look at the pictures. And it's so interesting to kind of look at yourself as a baby and to see, like, because usually it's the eyes, like when you look into, like, people will do mirror work, but when you look in the eyes, there's no kind of qualm about who you are. Like, there's something when they say, like, the eyes are the window to the soul. It's really true. And it was really interesting because I have a baby picture that sits on my dresser. And I don't, like, I pass it every day, but I don't know how closely I ever really looked at. Like, I haven't looked at it in years. And I sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, like, there's something about it that's still so the same. And there was this very, like, sort of curious, kind of like inquisitive sparkle in the eyes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I still have that. Like, that's still a part of me. And then I think also the other thing that I was talking to a client, and she was a nurse, and she's since left nursing, and she's kind of doing a lot of health coaching and everything. And she was, I don't know, she kind of commented and she said, well, I was a nurse. And I turned to her and said, you're still a nurse. Like, it's not like you can erase that part of you.
Right.
Like, it didn't existed. Like, I'm going to, I'm going to cut out that section of me. So, so it kind of, I like the word flavors, like, it kind of flavors who we are.
Mm.
Like, it's like the seasoning that you put in, like, you know what I mean? It kind of seasons who you are. Maybe it doesn't, maybe you're not practicing the same way as you used to because you're not, working in a hospital on a clinical floor or whatever. She was a
Yeah.
cardiac nurse. But she still has everything she learned, which she carries forward with her, all the schooling, all the technical stuff, she still carries with her. So I was like, you're still a nurse, and so it kind of was like all of a sudden she said, and so now she actually uses that because she had kind of left it out of when she would talk to people.
Yeah.
And I was like, why leave it out? I mean, and so it was just interesting as we're talking to kind of think that we almost kind of separate out these things. It's kind of like we think we can leave out one part of our identity, but
Well,
really we're all of it.
that's the most nonsensical way for us to refer to ourselves or be referred to by other people. Um, being what we get paid for,
Yeah.
it's nonsense, folks. Who you are this is one of the things that you do that's a value of somebody else at this time, and they're giving you money to do that on a regular basis. That has nothing to do with who you are. And I've watched some really amazing people with some. We talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago. I've got a friend who was a highly paid performer, post vaudeville kind of a slapstick act, where he and his partner, he is like 5'4", very athletic French guy, and his partner was 6'5", 6'6", so they could do flips and all these aerial things while he's
Me, Bill.
he never does. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like friends like us. Yeah. Well done. So they never do get to playing the instrument, but it's a half-hour long act, and they were in demand everywhere in the world. Well, this guy made millions of dollars back in the 1960s and early 70s. He came to the United States with his wife, who was from the United States, raised his kids here, and he worked at manual labor jobs. All of his career after he turned about 40 years old. He's 80, 81 now. He banked all the money that he made, in show business. And he and his wife lived beneath their means, with both of them having these above average, but not, world beating jobs. And it turns out that they've paid cash for everything they've ever bought for the last 40, 50 years. Not out of the money that he made from show business, but the money they made since. So he came from post-World War II Paris that had been occupied by the Germans. And so his way of coming out of that life was to be extraordinary and exceptional. But when he showed up for his job, who he was a maintenance guy. Who he was a guy who built computers. Who he was, no, you don't know who he was. This guy knew Bob Hope. He knew, all the big names, all around the world. He worked Vegas shows. He worked Nice. He worked, you name it. It's an extraordinary thing that these people now have to live inside of whatever they're getting paid for. That's your description? I don't think so, Tim. I think we can do better than that. What if we looked at everybody like what their possibility was?
Well, and when you're talking about that, Bill, it just makes me think of worthiness, right? Like, we are all worthy for being who we are, and there's no like dollar value or action driven thing. I know, like for me, I'm working on even just building up my own self worth, kind of on a regular basis, because I don't need to be anybody else but me,
Right.
and that's totally fine. And whether I'm making more money one month or less money the next month, or like, that has no effect on my worthiness, like as a human being. I think we always have to, like, everybody is worthy of anything.
Right. And to your point, I think that what it reminded me of, because lately I've been doing a lot of sort of self-reflection on my view of what I quote unquote perceive as being successful.
Right.
And to your point, being, my idea of success has greatly changed over the last, like, I want to say 20, 30 years. Like, it's like where I measured success based on how many degrees I had and how much money I made. And, I wanted to be quote unquote successful. And then all of a sudden, now to me, if I get up and I help one person, I've been successful. Like, like, did I change someone's life? Yes, I'm successful. Like, and looking at it much more about how, like, having to reframe that and kind of remind myself of that, when I happen to revert kind of down that path again of kind of like, looking at my bank account and for example, and having that determine how successful I am, or something else. But I think that to your point of being worthy, that was the other way I had to like really reframe my way of thinking of like, what do I decide? Like I decide what successful is for me.
Yep. Yep. And right. And we have to, going back to that idea of creating those meanings, right? Like the words have meaning, and we have to decide what they're going to mean for us, whether
That's
it's
right.
worthiness or success or whatever. We have to create those meanings. And if the meaning isn't what we want, then we can change the meaning. We can reframe the meaning that we give it. And then that changes our relationship to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. In terms of changing it, if it's more, bigger, better, or less, or something of that nature, it's going to still have the aftertaste. But if you can transform it into something completely new, having been completely present with whatever it was, you now are standing on a fresh fallen snow that you can make angels in, or you can do downhill skiing, or maybe make a snowman, or do any darn thing you want to, And I guess that's really, what's important to me in the world, is to show people there's never either this or that. I mean, I help them upgrade to a stack of, Richard Simmons Steal a Meal cards in their life. And then there's an exercise that we do where, there just isn't a card available for it. And I say, well, why don't you cut the top off of that card and attach it to the bottom of this card? Now you got what you need, right? Oh, we can do that? Isn't the rules you got to use no, man, just not more cards. It's like, do anything, get her done,
100. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you know what, folks, we have done it again.
Yeah.
Another hour of
always a pleasure to talk to you, Bill and Jan.
Yeah.
I always love it.
Same here. Any thoughts, Jason, you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, let go of the rules. There are no rules for anything, right? Like, you create your rules, and just, if you don't like the rules that are set forward, make new ones. And, if you don't like the way you're moving forward, then change it. Change your story, change your rules. I'm always a fan of doing it and then apologizing later, but that's what works for me, for sure.
Yes. You gotta trust yourself. And if you're feeling stuck, it's probably because you got a rule you made you forgot about.
Right.
Jan, how about you? Any final thoughts for today?
No, I mean, I love that. I love that. Just remember that you create the rules. And you just, what kind of game do you want to play?
Yeah, it can certainly be bigger. It can be better. It can be completely new and transformed.
And it can be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
That's right.
So, Jan, would you like to send our folks off with our...
Sure. Oh, so everybody out there, we always kind of end with this same message. And especially, I think, during this time of year, during the holiday season, where people can be going through a hard time, just make sure that you call someone, let them know how much you appreciate them, that they matter in your life, that if they need you, you're there for them. And that would be what I would send everybody off with.
Terrific. I love you all. I always will. And you don't get a vote on it. Okay. Just get it. So in the meantime, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I appreciate the time today with both you, Jan, and you, Jason. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.